today? Are you fine? That's good. Are you ready for today's lesson? That's great. So today's lesson is part number 2 of reported speech. Have you watched part number 1 of the lesson? If not yet, you will find the link below. So now let's start with part number 2 of the lesson of reported speech. We are going to deal with 2 examples of the same conversation. Conversation number 1 in the first example is between Mehdi and Sarah. During the conversation, Mehdi says,
My aunt arrived yesterday.
Conversation number 2 is between Sarah and Hassan. During the conversation, Sarah says,
Mehdi told me my aunt arrived yesterday.
As you can notice, Sarah uses the exact words of Mehdi in conversation number 1 when she says, My aunt arrived yesterday. This is what we call direct speech. In example number 2, we have the same people and the same subject. We have conversation number 1 between Mehdi and Sarah. And Mehdi says again, My aunt arrived yesterday. But look at conversation number 2. During the conversation, Sarah this time says,
Mehdi told me his aunt had arrived the previous day.
Does Sarah use the exact words of Mehdi? Of course not. This is what we call reported speech. Have you noticed all the changes that we have in conversation number 2? This is what we are going to deal with in details in this video. In the first part of the lesson of reported speech, I mentioned something very important. I said that the changes that occur when we shift from direct speech to reported speech depend on the tense of the reporting verb. In the first part of the lesson, we dealt with the first case, which is the case of the present tense, and we talked about the common changes. Today, we're going to talk about the second case, which is when the reporting verb is in the past tense. Do you know the changes that happen when we shift from direct speech to reported speech when the reporting verb is in the past tense? So, let's study them together now. When the reporting verb is in the past tense, we should pay attention to the following changes: the subject pronoun, the object pronoun, the possessive adjective, and the reflexive pronoun. If you watched the first part of the lesson of reported speech, you could see that the 4 changes, the changes at the level of the subject pronoun, the object pronoun, the possessive adjective, and the reflexive pronoun, also happen when the reporting verb is in the present tense. That is to say, these changes occur either when the reporting verb is in the present tense or the past tense. Here there is no problem. But the changes we're going to see now happen only, and I say again, only when the reporting verb is in the past tense. One of these changes is the tense of the verb in the sentence. Simple present becomes simple past. The present continuous becomes the past continuous. The present perfect becomes the past perfect. Simple past becomes past perfect simple. The past continuous becomes the past perfect continuous. And the past perfect, either simple or continuous, we have no change. This means when we have the past perfect simple, we don't change the tense. And when we have the past perfect continuous, we don't change the tense too. Next is the future. We have different tenses of the future. The future simple, the future perfect simple, the future perfect continuous, and the future continuous. What is important here is the change at the level of the word will. It becomes would. And what comes after will, we don't change it. An example. Will do. It becomes would do. Another example. Will have been. It becomes would have been. The next important change is the case of modals. Can becomes could, shall, should, may, might, have to, had to, must. When we use it to express obligation, it becomes had to. There are some modals, however, that do not change although the reporting verb is in the past tense. These include could, should, had to, might, and ought to. What about adverbs and demonstratives? Do we need to change them too? This is what we're going to see now. Now becomes then, no change, today, that day, tonight, that night, tomorrow, the following day, or the day after. Next becomes the following. For example, next week becomes the following week. Next month becomes the following month. Also, we can say for next week, the week after, and for next month, the month after, etc. Last week, the previous week. Last month, the previous month. Last year, the previous year. Or we say the week before, the month before, the year before, etc. Yesterday becomes the previous day or the day before. Ago becomes before. No change. Here becomes there, and there, no change. What about this? This becomes that. These becomes those. But that and those, we don't change them. Now, we are going to study two examples so that you can understand more these changes we have been talking about. So, let's start with the first example. The sentence in direct speech is, Emma said, I am having lunch now. In this sentence, we have the quotation marks, the subject pronoun I, the verb I'm having, which is composed of the auxiliary and the main verb, and finally the adverb of time, now. The next step is to rewrite the sentence which is in direct speech using reported speech. We're going to start with Emma said. Said here is the reporting verb and it is in the past tense. So when the reporting verb is in the past tense, we need to pay attention to the changes we have been talking about in this video. Let's finish the sentence. Do we need to use the colon? Of course not. What about the quotation marks? We don't need the quotation marks when we use reported speech. Next is the subject pronoun I. It becomes she. Why? Because she refers to Emma. Next is I'm having becomes was having. Why this change? Here we have the case of the tense. The tense in the first sentence, which is in direct speech, is the present continuous. I am having. According to the rule or the changes we have been talking about in this video, the present continuous, we change it into past continuous. Was having. She was having. Next is the word lunch. There's no change. And finally, the adverb of time. Now it becomes then. Now let's study the second example. The sentence in direct speech is this film can break all box office records, Salim told me. In this sentence we have the quotation marks, the demonstrative pronoun this, and the modal can. Now we are going to rewrite the sentence using reported speech. The first thing we start with is Salim told me. Told is the reporting verb, and it is again in the past tense. So we need to be careful when we're writing the sentence. We need to pay attention to the changes we have been talking about in this video. Next is the quotation marks. Do we need to use them? Of course not. This becomes that. Can, which is a modal, it becomes could. And then we write the rest of the sentence as it is. Break all box office records. I hope that you have understood part number 2 of reported speech. If you haven't watched the first part of the lesson yet, I recommend that you watch it because it is going to help you understand part number 2 very well. And I'm going to share the link of the video in the comments below. If you still have any problems, don't hesitate to write your questions in a comment or to send an email on the following address, leo.help.24h@gmail.com. Do you know how to report questions, commands, advice, and suggestions? This is what we're going to deal with in part number 3 of reported speech. So, don't forget to subscribe to learn English online and activate the bell icon to get notified of our latest updates. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.